Okay, I'd like to get your attention and welcome you to our campus here at Val. And before we get started, I'm just going to very briefly mention we do have some magazines in the back called Luminaries. It's a magazine published by Val, as well as some tax information. We have our accountant here for taxes.
Financial.
Oh, okay, so we do have some relating to taxes, but we do have that information on the table as well. So help yourself, and then if you have any questions regarding the Val, let me know. But I'd like to turn it over to Amanda with Senior Blue Book to get us started. So thanks again for being here.
Thank you. So in each of your giveaway bags here, there is a copy of the Seniors Blue Book. My name's Amanda Barton. I'm the publisher of this. It's my heart and soul. Always looking for suggestions on ways to improve the quality of what you see here, and I'm actually in the middle of laying out my annual edition for the 2019-2020. So big project that I'm undergoing right this minute, as a matter of fact. So a lot of folks don't know how to use this. They know it's a valuable resource, but they pick it up and they're kind of overwhelmed with the amount of resources that are in there. So I always like to take just a moment to explain how to actually use the book itself. The first half is an A through Z directory of resources. So think of audiologists, hospital offices, doctor offices, ophthalmologists, hearing professionals, things of that nature. All of that can be found in this area right here. And each of the panelists that are up here today, you can find their contact information in the book as well. I think Jeffrey has a good spiel that if you flip to his cardstock and bring that in, you get a free consultation. Is that right, Jeffrey? So he'll go over all of that information in detail with you as well. But the back half of the book is actually where we kind of started the business, and it's a comparison grid. So if you flip to the back, you'll see what looks like an opportunity for you to compare apples to apples, senior housing, home care, home health, things of that nature. A lot of questions that I get asked in these panels can actually be answered back here in the grids, because it'll tell you starting price ranges. It'll also tell you if they have 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, if they accept pets, if they have activities and transportation. So just kind of keep an eye out. If you have questions, take a look at that information, because a lot of times people wait until they're in a crisis situation before they open the book for the very first time. And that's when you're making bad decisions and you're scatterbrained, when you're trying to force too much information all at one time. So that's my spiel, and I apologize for my outfit today. I've been running around looking for a venue for our annual Senior Living Symposium, and I had to do a lot of footwork today, so I had to put my tennis shoes on. So I appreciate your understanding. Well, thank you. So today's topic is definitely an uncomfortable one, but it is a necessary one, and I applaud you for being here. I do think the title makes people a little weary, but there are 2 things that we simply cannot avoid, and that's death and taxes. So we've assembled this panel of experts up here, and we're going to go over some of the questions that you have. I have some icebreaker questions, but you'll be doing me an enormous favor if you ask your questions. We really want the participation, and we want this to be an interactive presentation instead of us just talking to you. So please don't be shy. We're a small group of ladies here, so let's ask as many questions as you can come up with. I'd be really grateful. I'm going to give each panelist an opportunity to introduce themselves, talk a little bit about the company that they're here representing, and then we'll get started. So take it away, Ms. Marge.
Okay, I'm Marge Peters. I'm a team administrator of what is known as our facilities team here at Val, which is the team that handles patients that are in ALFs, nursing homes, and any independent type of living within some of those facilities. An example would be, say, like Bentley, where you have different levels of care. We also have a home team who comes out and visits patients and families within their homes. And what we are looking at, we come out, we assess to see if your loved one is appropriate. And when we're looking at that, we're looking at Medicare's criteria of, in our physician's opinion, would that look like 6 months or less? And within that time, we can offer physical support, emotional support, and not just for the patient, but you as the family as well, help with planning, guidance, spiritual concerns.
Perfect. Bernadette?
Yes, hi.
Good afternoon, ladies. My name is Bernadette LaPaglia. I serve as community liaison for Hodges Funeral Home, which is a Dignity Memorial provider. Dignity Memorial is a national organization that now has over 2,000 facilities throughout the United States. Hodges Funeral Home dates back to the early 1950s, and it was founded by Earl Hodges. Earl and Thelma Hodges have come to be known as icons in our community, although Earl passed away in 2013. One of his natural inclinations as a funeral director was to be very much a part of the community, and it is in that light that I was tapped when he was in active decline to serve as community liaison, to carry on his good work, his good presence in the community, but especially given my role previously as a hospice nurse in Rochester, New York, where I happen to hail from. Does that name ring any bells? Does that place ring any bells, other than snow?
Snow.
Yeah, that's what it rings.
And he was very enthused regarding my background as a hospice nurse. And at first, did not think that working at a funeral home was in my future. But the more I thought about my years working as a hospice nurse, one of the things that has forever remained so prominent in my mind is not so much the beauty of hospice as it has the capacity to draw the family together. And the kumbaya moment, as we always used to say, at the loved one's dying bedside. But that kumbaya could quickly deteriorate into the family feud.
Mm-hmm.
And why? That would be if dear old dad had not pre-planned his funeral. And one of the characteristic scenarios that unfolded all too often would be the loved one departs, and then, let's say, a sibling on one side of the bed just kind of breathes the sigh of relief and says, "Thank God I know Dad wanted to be cremated." And it was almost as if on cue, you could wait for, as they say, the other foot to drop. The sister, let's say, would say, "Daddy didn't want to be cremated, he wanted to be buried." And then it would be like, "What are you talking about?" Thus, the conflict that would have been so easily avoided could have been assuaged.
There's a lot of different examples we'll get into with that for sure.
So that became my inspiration, in short, to serve as community liaison for Hodges and to do everything I can, given my background, to encourage and enlighten people about the importance of pre-need planning, not only financially, but also emotionally. And it remains my inspiration.
Okay.
So, that said, I will now introduce, I believe your name is Jeffrey?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, Jeffrey.
My name's Jeffrey Gennaro. I'm an estate planning attorney. I own an office here in Naples. We've been practicing for about 15 years. We essentially do estate planning, which is wills and trusts, guardianship, probate litigation, dispute resolution litigation, and we are the people that you call when you want to say that Dad did not want to be cremated. We handle those litigation issues between the two parties. But just so you know, we do represent both sides of the fence, though. We do represent clients that are going into facilities and facilities that are going after clients that have been difficult. It's one of the things that you do want to avoid, and we'll tell you some things that you want to be aware of today The most important thing being, don't listen to your friends from other states that try to tell you how things will work here in Florida. Florida is a very different state than other states. I'm licensed in Florida and in Pennsylvania, and the rules apply completely differently here in many instances.
Very good advice. All right, Lenny, last certainly but not least.
Thank you. Lenny Canova, I'm with Modern Woodmen of America. No, we do not make cabinets. Everyone thinks we do cabinet building. We are a 138-year-old full-service financial company. The thing that sets us apart is that we are a not-for-profit. Doesn't mean we don't make a profit. We make a very good profit. However, we give our profits back to local communities and to our members. We are a fraternal organization, so when you have a product with us, you become a member. Last year, we gave over $35 million nationwide. 135,000 of that was in Lee and Charlotte County. We're starting to expand. We're coming down to Naples. Hopefully, we can start spreading some of that money down here in Naples as well. My expertise or my passion is protection of assets and transfer of assets. Nobody likes Uncle Sam. Nobody wants to give their money to them. So we try to make the transition from family member to family member with as little taxes or possibly no taxes at all. That's
Yeah.
it. That's me.
So I'll elaborate on that. We'll start on this corner because this is where we ended. So tell me one strategy for someone to pass their assets to their heirs in a tax efficient manner. Kind of covers both of our topics today with death and taxes. And again, remember, I want to hear your questions. These are just my initial icebreakers. So please write your questions down and ask away.
One way is life insurance. It's passed along. It avoids probate. It goes right to the heir. There's absolutely no taxes involved. So it is a tax-free way of sending money. Another way would be Roth IRAs, if you're worried about the taxes. So Roth IRAs would just transfer to your heirs tax-free as well. IRAs, a lot of people don't realize it. The people that I talk to don't realize it. They have these large IRAs, 401ks, 403bs, those type of things, and they want to leave them to their family, to their children. However, the biggest beneficiary in those IRA accounts is the IRS, and it's sad because they're sharing all the family's money with the IRS. So my strategies are I sit down with the families, talk about, look at the accounts you have, and how we can try and save paying taxes on that money.
Any questions from you guys yet? Okay. We'll move down the line. Mr. Gennaro, what type of legal documents do you need to have in place to avoid or protect your estate from probate and save your family members that trouble?
Well, certainly the most common device that's used to avoid probate is a trust. In Florida, you can be looking at paying up to 3% of whatever your family's assets are as a probate fee to the attorney, as well as costs to the trustee, to the personal representative. Most people use a trust to avoid some of those probate fees. There's a statute here in Florida that goes over how much those fees are presumed to be reasonable at and how those fees work. But to do that, if those transfers are going to be accepted by Medicaid or other governmental entities, you have to have a properly executed power of attorney that allows for those transfers. If you don't, not a problem. You'll just have to do a guardianship over your loved one. What does a guardianship cost? Usually starts about $3,500 to $5,000, depending on what attorney you go to. And that's an uncontested guardianship. If you get into a contested guardianship, my son wants to be the guardian, no, my daughter wants to be the guardian, now you're looking at the sky's the limit, $50,000 to $100,000 easy. So a small document such as a power of attorney that allows you to make transfers, simple transfers like this. In Florida, we're allowed to do what's called a spousal refusal, which means you're allowed to take so much money from your spouse in order to make them indigent, and you can then refuse to pay for their medical coverage. Okay? Now, there's all sorts of rules around that issue, and there's all sorts of limitations and things that you need to know, but in general, you can do that. But without a power of attorney, when you're making gifts from your spouse to yourself, Medicaid will say these gifts are not allowed, even though the state allowed you to do them, even though you have a joint bank account in some instances. Medicaid can come back and say, no, we're going to keep that on their side of the fence, and you'll have to spend that down at the facility to the tune of usually $10,000 to $12,000 a month because you wanted to avoid a $500 document. So I would say that powers of attorney are more important than most other documents. Certainly revocable living trusts are the common thing to do for people down here to avoid probate, to avoid that probate process. And they also have other sorts of benefits such as creditor protection, depending on the choices you make in that trust to pass on assets to your loved ones. So if you don't like your son-in-law and you want to make sure that your daughter keeps the money, and the son-in-law doesn't say, well, honey, we got a big check from your mother, so why don't we simply pay off our house? You pay off the house, and then the son-in-law has what we call a renewed sense of independence with bubbles, and says, we're now going to split the house because it's paid off. In lieu of that, we say, well, if we set up a trust, they can still pay off the mortgage. Most common thing we do is we have the home be purchased by the trust. So they own a trust. Your son and your daughter-in-law are married. They have 2 kids, and instead of paying off the house is purchased by the trust. And then if your daughter-in-law says that she wants to get a divorce and that she thinks it's important that the children stay in the home and all of those wonderful things, that's great. But your son says, I agree, Your Honor, the kids should stay at the home. But the trustee, because I've resigned as the trustee, will only rent the home to me and won't allow this individual to stay. So I agree, we should keep the kids there, but they should stay with me. Otherwise, the kids are going to have to be disrupted. And it's not your son that's doing that. He resigns as trustee and he puts somebody else in place. He may even put the divorce attorney in place as the serving trustee. So those sorts of little tactics that you have later in life that we hope you never have to use. We hope your families are wonderful, everybody gets along great, and all those other great, wonderful things happen. But in the event that they don't, you want to have some of these little protections in place, and they're relatively inexpensive to do.
Good example.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
I went through something like this, and the lawyer, I asked their lawyer, what kind of assets that you need, or do you have to get a trust? And he said, unless you have millions of dollars, you don't need a trust. So
if you're only looking at saving the probate fees, you have $1 million, and I'm talking in general here. You have $1 million of probatable assets. In general, the fee is going to be $30,000. If you have a trust, you'll have a reduction of that fee by 25% by statute. Most attorneys will do a little less than that anyway because it's a lot easier when you have a trust. Things go a lot faster. Okay? You don't have to wait for court approval on many things. But let's say you're only getting the minimum savings allowed. You're saving $7,500 off of $1 million. Off of $500,000, $15,000 fee, 25% of that's roughly $3,750. So you can see that you don't need a whole heck of a lot of money for just the probate savings. The real power of trusts, though, is the fact that when you leave money to your children, you can make that money creditor-proof for them. We call it the OK Corral. We can set up an OK Corral for them so that if everything else goes wrong, your son-in-law's business fails, the house that they live in, which has the $2 million mortgage on it, goes under, the money that's in the trust can never be touched, okay? Can never be attacked by anybody, okay?
What
So-
if you don't have $1 million? Do you still need to do a trust?
Many people do because of the creditor protection savings and the avoiding of the waiting process for a probate. Probates take easily 6 months to a year and a half. So while you're waiting for that whole process to come down, there's some attorney, usually, that is billing you something every month.
Mhm.
So let's say he sends you a bill for $750 a month for a year and a half. You know, because $750 a month for an attorney is not a big bill, working an hour and a half. You can see how he's going to charge you almost $15,000, a little less, in a year and a half. So if you want to avoid probate fees and the probate process, certainly doing a trust is your best bet. The amount of assets you have to have does vary. The more assets you have, the more benefits you get. But most people I find that have $500,000 or even less, they should take a look at doing a trust. Not that they should always do a trust. Because it depends. If you have $500,000 and you have 10 beneficiaries, and each person's going to get 50 grand, what are you paying to protect 50 grand for? You can protect 50 grand by paying off the house or doing any number of other things. But if you have more significant funds that you expect them to keep for a long period of time and use the interest off of that, certainly looking into a trust would be good.
Now, okay, we're living in Florida now, but I know at one point, if I get to where I need to move to a different state because my son is in a different state, what happens? Do I have to get the new trust?
Well, that's kind of a loaded question.
Well,
The question is, so I do a trust here in Florida. When I go to another state, should I do another trust? In short, you should. Why? Because you want to take advantage of that state's trust code if it's more beneficial to you. Okay? Each state has their own trust code, has their own way of making trusts, and has their own way for implementing those trusts. Many people come from other states to enact trusts in Florida, even though they're not residents. So they want to use Florida's trust code to manage their assets later.
Is it because it's more favorable in Florida?
To many states, it's more favorable. Sometimes we use other states, depending on what we're doing, such as Nevada, Wisconsin, the Dakotas, depending on what exactly we're trying to achieve. Many creditor protection strategies revolve around placing trusts in other jurisdictions to avoid being brought to litigation both in just Florida. So we want any creditor to have to sue in Florida, sue in the Dakotas, make the cost for them to litigate the issues much higher in order to defend the client's position. But in general, you should consider looking at those other states. But why on earth would you want to leave Florida? No.
they'll have to drag me all the way.
But usually people keep their trust documents in Florida. When they move to another state, they choose to maintain their Florida trust in Florida, and when they pass away, they use that Florida trust to effectuate their wishes. That doesn't mean you shouldn't get powers of attorney, healthcare surrogates, living wills, pre-need guardianship designations done in other states when you go there. Okay, and your will renewed in that other state. It just means that many people choose Florida to maintain their trust assets.
So you don't need a residence then at that time.
You don't have to be a resident of Florida. You choice of law in Florida to have a Florida trust.
Thank you.
I have a question. Can you give us some examples of assets that aren't impacted by probate? If there's no trust in place?
In general, joint bank accounts, any account with a beneficiary designation, Life insurance with a beneficiary designation that does not make it that does not make your estate a beneficiary. So those assets.
So annuities also, I'm assuming.
Provided that the annuity says, don't pay to my estate, pay to my son Bob.
Yeah, there's a named beneficiary.
That type of thing. But even in those instances, once the asset reaches, and I'll just say your son Bob, you've lost the ability to do creditor protection. You've lost the ability for you to creditor protect that asset for him. So you're missing one of the great reasons people do trusts. Once money is in a properly funded and properly executed trust, the creditor protection that can inure to that trust, if it's a Florida trust, is pretty strong. So you have to be real careful that you don't want to miss out on that simply because you're saying, well, I know what I'll do. I've got $500,000 in an annuity. I'll have it payable to my son, so I'll avoid the probate fees of $15,000 or the trust administration fees of $11,250. Okay? And won't that be great? And if he ever gets sued, they'll just take it. So there's a lot of reasons to reevaluate the beneficiary designations on items. With one also caveat, there's something called, every state has this, but in Florida there's something called an elective share statute, which says that if you're married and you leave all of your money to somebody other than your spouse, or you don't leave them a certain percentage of your estate actually, or your estate with certain invasion rights, they can come back and get that money from the people you gave it to. So for example, she and I are married, okay, and I say, honey,
Really?
oh, yeah. And I say, honey, don't worry, I'm gonna take care of you. You just quit your job, we'll be together forever, okay?
Less.
Because she's 26 and I'm 56, okay? And so she quits her job, and then 20 years later, I'm 76, I die, okay? She's now 46. And she said, well, my husband said he's going to leave all this money to me. And I leave all the money to my son, okay? And my son says, you know, lady, I never, you're welcome. You know what, lady, I never liked you. And my son says, I had one life insurance policy for $10 million, and it was paid directly to him, okay? Beneficiary designation. She then sues him to get $3 million, and can get it. Like, no problem.
Really?
My.
Even though that wasn't his wish?
Even though that wasn't his wish, because I lied to him. And it doesn't have to do with lying to her. She has the right to get that elective share, even though I gave everything to him. Even if I gave it to him before I died, within a certain period, she can come back and say, hey, I gave this to you 3 months ago. I'd like 30% of it.
Doesn't that work the same way? The opposite, like if I was or if you left everything to her, I'm your son, I can sue her?
Nope.
Isn't that what happened with Anna Nicole Smith? That's what I thought what happened
No,
with that whole
no,
thing
no,
there.
no. She was
Oh,
married
okay.
and she wanted an elective share, and he gave her he gave his kids all of the money and said, hey, fine, I'll give you this bundle of money. So he has, let's say, $100 million, and he says, look, I'll give you $20 million. She says, I'm entitled to 30.
Okay.
So how do you avoid that?
You don't.
No.
You don't. You get divorced.
I have a
Yeah.
question.
Mhm.
What about with adopted children?
Adopted children?
Yes.
Adopted children are treated as lineal descendants of you, once you've
Yeah, or
done.
legally adopted kids. Legally adopted.
Right, they're treated as just any of your
Natural
children,
kids.
as normal, as natural children. And that is another important thing, that when you have second marriages usually, he has 2 kids and you have 2 kids, but you've grown up together, but he hasn't adopted your children, or you haven't adopted his. Just understand that if you die in a common accident, okay, or if you die in an accident and you go first, your money goes to him, and his will can say, my money goes to my kids, and your kids are out.
Yeah.
That's it. So there's this situation of, something happens and mom's a fighter and dad wants to die with dignity. Now the dad's dead, mom wants to die with dignity too. So there can be people that say, keep this person alive no matter what. Okay? Because you can imagine a situation where there's significant funds and they say, put them in an iron lung. I want the doctor to keep them technically alive, or doc, you're gonna go from a doctor to an attorney right overnight. So you want to avoid those types of situations if possible.
Another question, for the state of Florida, if you want to favor, a couple of kids, say that you have 4 kids, 6 kids, and you want to favor the ones that maybe they are not making in life as well as other kids, what's the situation there?
Well, what we do when people want to give more to one child rather than another, so if you have 2 children, A and B is a problem child and A is a wonderful child, we make sure that in our documents we reflect that you know who B is, that you know that B exists, that you are fully contemplated giving your assets, and you've chosen to give them to A and to omit B. And so we have a special way in our office that we make sure that, because the arguments usually come in, mom was out of her mind, she didn't even realize she had 2 kids. Or the attorney made a mistake. He didn't ask her how many kids she had.
Makes it very uncomfortable when it gets to Bernadette's turn, huh? When they get to your place.
Oh, right.
The 2
for
kids.
Sure. So if that happens, we want to make sure that we have a chronology of having the discussion about the children, knowing that you knew who they were, knowing that you have this decision-making process. And also the strongest thing that you can do is execute your documents again periodically. At our office, we have what's called our up-to-date plan. Clients pay a flat fee, okay? And any changes to the code that come in to alter their documents, we do them for free. Okay? And it's relatively inexpensive, $500 for a couple. So when something changes, we send them a notice, hey look, the Power of Attorney Act changed. We need you to come in, and we must execute your documents again, please. Or this changed, if you want to take advantage of it or not, let us know. If you want a meeting or not, let us know. That's all complimentary, okay? But the strongest thing when you're doing something that's out of the ordinary, which would be writing out a child, you execute a document in 2019, then you re-execute it in 2020, you execute it again in 2022, because when the arguments against documents sound like this, mom was out of her mind, somebody had undue influence over her, she had dementia, she didn't know what was going on. And you say to the opposing counsel, you really want to go in there and argue that she was out of her mind in 2022, 2020, 2019? You think 3 different times she came in here and I missed it and she missed it all 3 times? Good luck.
Yeah.
So when you have unique things, re-execute the documents. Because if you wipe out the 2022 document, it goes back to the 2020 document. So then they wipe out that. It goes to the 2019 document. And I don't know any attorney that wants to go through 3 iterations of a document to try and say that you're out of your mind.
Sounds like that's pretty common.
Yeah. Or
Yeah.
that's what we litigate all the time.
Yeah.
And the most common mistake is the guy executed something in 1997 and never re-executed it again.
Well, she wasn't in her mind in 1997.
Right, and all we have to do is prove to, on that day when she went in, her son said, I'm not taking you home if you don't sign today.
Another question, the laws in Florida, they protect the seniors versus, the younger generation? Say that, the senior couple want to do whatever they want to do with their monies, and then one of the kids says, oh no, that's not going to be so. You want to come and live with us because, it's so expensive, blah, blah, blah.
Well, it's funny you should say that. Florida does have some pretty robust elder abuse statutes. And we even have a statute called abuse of a vulnerable adult, okay? Elderly abuse of a vulnerable adult, which is relatively new.
That's a very
Or
good
I should, relatively new isn't exactly correct, but it isn't used often. We are using it now in a case, as a matter of fact. And it deals with the following situation, where a person comes in and says, oh, I'm your friend, I want to help you. And she says that I am her friend. And I say, and she says, Jeff's so nice to me, I want to give him my house. And so I say, okay, she wants to give me her house, give me the house. You know, and we say, no, you shouldn't have taken the house from this person because now they can't afford to eat. You shouldn't have taken all the bank accounts from this person. You shouldn't. But they say, look, the person was perfectly fine. It doesn't matter if they're perfectly fine. You should have known, or they should have known, I shouldn't give away everything to the point where I can't eat. And that's what Florida's about, is protecting vulnerable adults. I can tell you that our judges in Collier County take that issue very seriously and respond very quickly.
I'm supposed to go to Florida, you know, and I'm Spanish by birth, and we say, Florida es la antesala del cielo, which we try to translate, the portal to heaven.
Oh, right, this is God's waiting, for
God's
sure.
waiting room, yes.
So there are a lot of, you know, the percentage of senior citizens that we are on our way out, are much larger here in the state than some of the other states in the country.
Yeah, I think we have the highest percentage population of senior citizens in the country. And where I'm also licensed, I believe is now as the second largest population, which is Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania.
Yeah, strange. It's this.
Wonderful.
And you can't figure it out. It's this. When because I grew up in Pennsylvania. When you grow up in a coal mine, you can't get out. In Florida, they choose to come. But in Pennsylvania, they can't leave. So they're stuck. You know, so all those steel mill towns, coal miner towns, all of those stuff, the elderly folks, they don't have the money to say, well, I think I'll get the heck out of here.
Okay. I always like to open with the funeral director with a kind of fun icebreaker. As we all know, the cost of living continues to go up. Tell us about the cost of dying, Bernadette.
Well, first of all, I'm not a funeral director.
Well.
Pardon me. As I referred to my role before, mine is primarily as educator, motivator, and inspirer. Funeral directors and family service counselors are certified, licensed, and for the most part degreed in their various roles within this whole oeuvre of death and dying. But yes, indeed, the cost of dying is very much in keeping with the increases in the cost of living. I think one of the things that occurs to me as Jeffrey and Mr. Woodman.
Lenny.
I've been called worse.
What is it,
Lenny.
Lenny?
Yes.
Lenny, pardon me.
That's all right.
Is another adage of Ben Franklin in keeping with the title of this gathering, Death and Taxes. Of course, he said the only thing certain in life is death and taxes. But he also said the ounce of prevention is worth what? A pound of cure. And certainly Jeffrey has illuminated just how much the pounds of cure are waiting if you have not followed the really the discipline of the ounce of prevention. And I think it's fair to say that throughout our lives, that adage is so meaningful. You know, if you don't get your car serviced regularly, you can suddenly find yourself in need of a transmitter? What's it called?
Transmission.
Transmission, oh my gosh. So there we have the ounce of prevention, the pound of cure. But in the case of funeral planning, I would assert that in this file that is so critical that Jeffrey and Lenny have referred to, that really the linchpin is the funeral plan. The linchpin is the funeral plan. And ironically, in this age of the denial of death, because we are certainly in denial as a culture today, it tends to be the last thing that is addressed. Not only is this more costly, because well, let me just say, there are two basic categorizations in this respect. One of them is pre-need planning, and the other is at-need planning. Well, of course, at-need means the person is either dying, as in imminent, or has already passed away. So that means on-the-spot execution of a funeral plan. Whereas pre-need planning, the merit in that is that when you execute that and you make that purchase, you lock in the price. Now, to lock in the price in the context of the ounce of prevention, one of the things that's always fascinating and many times ongoing at Hodges is there will be typically an elder couple either checking on their pre-need plan or perhaps one of the spouses has passed away. And it is always a thrill to see those that have pre-need planning as, I think the furthest back that I've ever seen was in the 50s.
Wow.
Like, the cost of purchasing a plot is like a piece of real estate today. Whereas in the 50s, perhaps it was like $250, $350. These were not necessarily financially endowed people as much as they made a decision to come to Florida. And this is an important point because everyone says, what's the best time to pre-need your funeral plan? The answer is any time, but of course when any time is the answer, it tends to be no time. So it's always helpful to try and designate a certain nodal point in our lives when it's like, you know what? I'm just gonna go for it. I'm going to steel myself and I'm gonna take this initiative and execute this important document. So in the case of this one particular couple, when they moved from Minnesota, it was like, okay, we're making this huge decision to come to Florida. We're buying a home, we've sold our old home, we've, redistributed the furniture or whatever, or maybe they've downsized. And in the process of all of that mindset, they pre-needed their funeral plan. And if I remember correctly, they paid, I think it was $35 a month until it was completely purchased. Now today, let's say you pass away, this lovely lady, you pass away in 35 years, 40 years. But if you were to pre-need your funeral plan today, and of course the fundamental decision is always, do you want to be cremated or buried? And if you want to be cremated, would you like to purchase a mausoleum? Or if you want to be buried, you have to purchase a plot. Those financial decisions can still be paid for incrementally. I believe the longest is 3 years, but still, it is not required that you pay the lump sum at present.
Can you give us a comparison on the costs of what,
What you say?
yeah, if you paid $250, $300 for it back in the 50s, what is a piece of land?
You know what? That's a very good question. I guess I would just have to,
Ballpark it for
I
us.
would have to ballpark it. Ooh, let's see. Well, let's just say it's thousands of dollars. And sometimes you might see in like the want ads, when someone will advertise that they have a plot that they want to
Get rid of.
get rid of.
Interesting thought.
Yes, because
I've
It
seen
they,
is, it's real estate.
Yeah.
It really
they've
is.
made other decisions,
Mhm.
or perhaps it has been brought to their attention by their children that they would like them to make other decisions.
Mhm.
In which case, that real estate, as you say, Lenny, is, it's up to the individual who has purchased it to initiate the resale, so to speak. And it's not unusual that it occurs. But there are some really stunning scenarios that have occurred at Hodges. One of them is at our new section at the cemetery. It's called Sunset Beach, and it's really worth a
Beautiful.
visit. It is an absolutely stunning segment that is designed to reflect the historic Naples Pier. It's sort of like a mini Naples Pier. Have you seen it?
No, but I'm just now starting to see the grounds, and I have no idea. It's right by St. John the Evangelist, right?
Yes, right.
I guess I haven't seen it recently.
Yes, well, you know, come
Come
and
on
visit
down.
anytime. But it's surrounded by water and sand. And it has what would appear to be Adirondack lawn chairs in cement. Those serve as little mini mausoleums. There's a little, an island with a dolphin that was purchased by the Sugden family in tribute. So
This is
all-
beachfront real estate.
yes,
Right?
this is beach of another kind. But when you go there and the fountains that are part of this whole landscape, it's really, I guess I would have to say mystical and enchanting and peace-filled. Because, you know, the great tradition in our country has always been to visit the dead. You know, we do so on Memorial Day, we do so on Veterans Day, we do so on a birthday that you want to honor. But unfortunately, that tradition is starting to just,
Disappearing.
it's very much a theory,
Yes.
sadly. And I think that says something about our culture, and hopefully, I would like to think that that's trending in the other direction, simply because of the presence of so much support that is so apparent at Sunset Beach. Because when you go there and when you stand within that little mini pier place and you hear the fountains and just look around and see that, you know, there's turtles, and it's really very tastefully done, I must say. But the peace is what is so prompting in terms of recollection and helping us process this grand continuum of life of which we are a part.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Practical question. As the ultimate planner, and you might not know the answer to this question, but it is...
I'm sorry?
You might not know the answer, but it is pertinent to your field. There are a couple of teaching hospitals nationwide that accept corpses for their surgical students.
Yes.
I was no, it's not
No, for
organs.
research.
Or when, you know,
Whole body,
the
that's what
organs
I'm
aren't
doing.
worth anything when you're in your 70s, 80s or 90s. But the corpse overall is, because they can practice cutting it up and seeing, you know, the veins
Sure.
and the bones and the muscles and the whole thing. Are they still doing that? Because I think some of them must have been overwhelmed with offers.
Be careful, many of them you have to pay them to take the body.
Yes. Initially, they offered to cover the expenses themselves, to pick the corpse up
Do you
and
wanna
take it to wherever the
Share your
hospital was.
experience?
But since then, you might be right, they found it expensive and they've had many offers, so they're thinking, well, we'll let the loved ones.
Yeah,
pay for
we've
it.
had many patients who try to do that, and often they are told it will cost them money.
Oh, really?
You want to share your experience?
Yeah, I just did it with my mother in March, and it was nothing, cost me nothing, and I'm doing it for me.
Yes.
So I already have it set up and everything, and it costs nothing.
Yes.
Who did you go through?
With my mother, I went through MedCure,
Yes.
and with me, I'm doing science care. And it's like you look it up, you want to make it so that these are legit type
yeah,
of
yeah,
things.
yeah.
So you looked at it, and I did. And yeah, it was nothing. You get a death certificate free, and
So
they
you
take the
haven't
body.
subsequently received a dear Mrs. So-and-so letter, we are no longer accepting donations of this nature? No.
No, not at all.
Okay.
Wonderful. So that was all on your own initiative?
Right, yeah. I knew I was going to do that a long time ago, and my mother agreed to it too. So.
And what inspired you?
Well, I'm like against animal testing and that kind of thing, and I think that we should do the research on human bodies for human illnesses. So that's why really it's an animal thing.
And so are you saying that you did not have to put this within a will?
No.
Uh-huh.
I mean, this is
Don't
separate,
worry,
like I-
not many people are doing it so far, so you needn't be concerned.
I
know you're
I'm
thinking-
very concerned just
What
to
happens
have
at the
this
end?
knowledge.
What happens at the end is after they're done doing the research, they will send the body back if you want.
To do cremation or...
Yeah, or whatever, yeah, it comes
Oh.
back cremated.
Or they
Oh, really?
maybe
Yeah.
can take care of the cremation.
Yeah, they take care of the cremation, you don't pay anything,
Yeah.
nothing. And they send the body back, or you can inter it wherever you want, but I want it, you know, cremated back.
Oh, that is so enlightening.
So you
I'm
write
sure
a
for you
document that you are donating your body for research?
Well, what it is you're gonna have like, with mine, I filled that out online, and I sent it in. And with my mother though, that was kind of a last minute thing, so I had like a 30-minute phone call with them, and they took all the information. You can't do it if you have the top 5 diseases, so if you have like,
Cancer.
no, it's not cancer, it's like the contagious diseases. You can't donate your body, but every other reason you can. So it was just a 30-minute phone call, they took down the information, and they really want to see if you have the top 5 contagious diseases, and that was it. And when she died, she actually died here, and the funeral home comes and gets the body, and then Orlando comes and gets the body, because
So
that's where she's
clarify
doing.
for me something, you have to be diagnosed with a chronic illness in order to donate, or you can donate?
No.
They
You
just
can die
want-
of any reason, but if you have like the top 5 contagious diseases, they won't take the body because
Oh,
the people doing the research are doing whatever they're
okay.
learning, you know, you don't wanna get them sick.
Okay.
Yeah.
How long ago did your mother pass?
March 2nd of this
Oh,
year.
recently.
Yeah,
So there's
recently.
still
What was your son?
Yeah.
What company was that?
Well, my mother was Medicare, but I went with science, I think I have it right in my wallet, actually, science something, but that one, I really did research on that.
That's
And,
really interesting.
yeah, here it is. Right here.
And is that a private entity or a government entity?
You should be on the panel now.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
is called Science Care, yeah. So I really researched and looked it up and made sure that everything, you know,
Right.
was good. It's a good one, so, yeah.
Well,
It's
hopefully
always
they.
Medicare, but this is, you know, I
Yeah.
did actually the research and everything.
That's really, really interesting. Thank
Yeah.
you for sharing.
And did your mother have to sign off on it?
She did like a year or so ago.
Ah.
Yeah, I signed off for the whole, I had her sign for the whole body donation, so, when I was starting to do all that stuff, you
Yeah.
know.
You wouldn't be able to just do it without their permission.
Contact me. No, no.
I think you can actually.
Really?
Yeah, because they didn't ask for any form that she signed at all. But I was also the DPOA, you know, the power of attorney thing, so, you know.
Yeah, because if there is more than one child and one disagrees with, you know, then you
Right,
gotta.
that was my question. Are you an only child?
Yes, I am.
Ah.
Yeah.
So
But I mean-
is there any line in the assessment that says, are you an only child?
No. Not that I can remember, no.
She probably filled it out for her mom. She
Yeah, I
didn't
did.
fill
I
it.
filled it out for her.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I still had
But
that
it's
she
still
signed.
to ask if the mother had, you know,
Somebody was gonna
multiple
contest
children.
Other
Because
children.
anybody can just, you know, say, I am also a child, and a little, you know, out of wedlock child, then what do you?
That I don't know. I don't know about that. I guess I'll
Or
have to look at
perhaps
the forms
this is the
again.
moment
Yeah.
to
he would-
contact Jeffrey.
Yeah, this is a joke.
We've been involved in these types of cases, to be honest. I've had a case where the second marriage,
It's always
the
the
wife
second or
died
third
from the
marriage.
first marriage, and the husband dies from the second marriage. The kids wanted the ashes of the first wife, and the husband mixed. They did not want to mix the ashes. They wanted to wait for the second wife to die to split them up. So there was an issue of them taking the ashes from the funeral home and absconding with them, and then trying to replace them, which can carry felony penalties, because it's, now you're stealing a body, even though it's a box of ashes, you know, it's stealing a body and all those other sorts of wonderful things that went along with that. But you can imagine tensions ran pretty high in that
Oh my
sort
Well,
of.
they always do in revenge cases.
Yes.
Well, I mean,
Nobody
you
knows
know,
that
it's,
better than you.
it was kind of like everybody just take a step back, take a breather, and let's talk about this in about 2 or 3 weeks. Let's give the ashes back to the funeral home, and let's just take a breather, and why don't we revisit this in about a month when everybody's cooled off? And after that, everybody kind of cooled off, but the funeral home was very helpful in getting those items back and saying, hey, look, you know, fine, we'll hold them here in the golden vault. You guys don't have to worry about it.
That really is the ultimate revenge story, though. It really is.
Yeah, you can't
Are you a
undo that.
novelist?
No, but you could make something out of that.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
All right, well, Miss Marge, I know Bernadette talked about the beauty of her place, and we're sitting on a very beautiful campus here. Talk to us about the services that hospice is offering folks, how they pay for it, and just kind of an overview, because I think people have this conception or misconception that it's simply just for end-of-life care, but there's so much more that you guys have to offer.
Yeah, unfortunately, as was mentioned, the society that we are, that we like to deny the fact that death is coming. Oftentimes, patients aren't referred to us. Right now, our average length of stay is less than 7 days. And you heard me mention before that even as far as Medicare is concerned, as long as a physician thinks that they're 6 months or less, that is sufficient in their eyes. Well, and if you think about it, and we don't, if you're on service, we don't discharge you at 6 months point in time either. As long as someone is meeting the criteria, the longer we have with the patient and their family, the longer time we have to build the relationship, to build the trust, to find out and get the stories of what the family ties are. Where are the problems going to result from the different children, and the first wife and the second wife? And, it'll eventually come out, what are the financial concerns? And we can start steering families and patients to have a chance to finish the things they want to finish. Maybe there's a legacy that they want to leave. Maybe they have grandkids. Maybe they want to do something, put together a video book, stories, etc. for them. The financial aspect of it. I mean, I can't imagine, I certainly it happens where maybe somebody goes in the hospital and finds out, oh, you have 24 hours to live. Personally, I would have a lot of things left undone, which is terrible coming from a hospital. But it's
We're
the truth.
usually the worst patients and.
Yes. The more time we can give people to get those things finished, the better off they are. And death brings out the worst in all of us. That is when the family disputes show up. And I often will tell new staff that I'm orienting that it could be a dollar bill, and there's going to be, if there's more than one person there, they're going to fight over that dollar bill. So we do make referrals to attorneys. If we have somebody we admit at home and the loved one is like, I'm doing this now and I'm doing the caregiving, but I'm not sure how much longer I can do this. Well, you have a hospice house I can put them in, right? So they can live there. Well, yes, we have a hospice house, but no, they can't live there. Our hospice house is designed for, if you think of it similar to a hospital, it's the intensive care of hospice. They are designed for when symptoms are so out of control that the family and or facility where the individual is staying can no longer handle it. So that hospice house, 24, 48, 72 hours, to either get symptoms under control or to be there at the very end to manage those symptoms while someone passes. So then we're still left with, okay, I've got my loved one, but I can't handle this. Do we need to get you started on the road to Medicaid? Do we need to get you started with a financial planner to see, where do you spend some of this money down, or how do you protect some of it? We start referring you to these gentlemen and people like them over here, because that's not, our goal is to help you along the road, but that's not our specialty. But we certainly know, often by using my big copy of your handy dandy little blue books there, we give you a copy of that book and say, well, here's the financial planners, here's the facilities, here's how you can compare them. Because we don't actually make referrals in particular to any one entity, but we'll tell you, we think you need an assisted living, we think you need someone to do financial planning, here's a list. If I have other patients who maybe have used someone, I can say, well, so-and-so used this company, maybe you want to check them out. So given the time, we can help with all of that, as well as, obviously the patients themselves with any type of symptoms, with pain, with shortness of breath, with anxiety. We can offer the personal care as far as a home health aide to go in several days a week to as much as daily if somebody needs that to help with those type of things. And if you have the ability, we're there to train you as a caregiver to give the care that is needed and to feel comfortable and sufficient in giving that care, so that you weren't brought up as a nurse. We as hospice nurses, unless, back when we started, hospice wasn't even out there. I'm sure it wasn't for you when you first went to nursing school. It didn't even start in this country until 82 and 83. You'll see most hospices, that's when they started, in that early 80s. So we'll give you the education you need to do this. We've spent our years, doing this. I started out as an intensive care nurse, knowing that, at some point in time, life has a beginning and life has an end. And yes, as a young nurse, it was all about saving, but the things I saw, I knew as my career developed, it was going to be all about the end. It's a part of living and a part of healthcare that we don't devote a lot of time to. So you'll find the professionals that work here, that's their whole focus, it's their whole goal.
people that come to hospice, they don't have to be necessarily being diagnosed with, you know, cancer or any major.
It started out as you primarily, you know, back in the early 80s, the primary diagnosis was cancer. Now we have a very large, especially our population in the facilities often have Alzheimer's, dementia diagnoses. Because down the road,
Heart failure, things of that sort.
yes, heart failure, breathing problems, your individuals, like some of the commercials you see on TV with asbestos, that type of thing. The diagnoses are all Parkinson's, they're all over the road. All of these illnesses, as you get later on, you know, down in years, just combined with life.
And do you still have that, you know, patients that are admitted into your facility, they have to have a physician's, you know, statement that they are terminally ill?
There does have to be a physician's statement that they are terminally ill, that in a physician's best prognosis, that if the illness were to run its course, that more than likely they would have 6 months or less to live. Now, that being said, like I said, every 6 months we do have to, you know, look at that and say, you know, do I still think that is the case? We have patients that are on service much longer than 6 months.
For sure.
Because nobody has a crystal ball. We don't know. And if you don't have a private physician, we have physicians on service ourselves that will look and say, you know, in their best guess.
If a patient is admitted in your facility, does that automatically transfer the patient's physician to the one that is in-house in hospice?
Not necessarily. You can keep your own physician. It's your choice who the physician is. Like I said, if you don't have a physician or you just would prefer to be under our physician, we can do that. If you have a physician that you trust, you've been with for years, and they have to agree to continue, the physician does. But that is fine. You keep your own physician. And under Medicare, there is no cost. Medicare has a separate hospice benefit that says, you know, the services that we provide and the equipment, whether you need a hospital bed or a wheelchair, maybe you need a walker, those things are all provided under that benefit. There is no cost to the patient or family.
How
There's
large
two
is this
physicians
facility here? How large is your facility?
Our facility here our inpatient facility has 16 beds.
60 beds?
16.
16.
16.
You only have 16 beds here?
But we, see, the primary bulk of our service is in the home. In the home and in like the ALS and the nursing home. So we have on average any given day about 350 patients on service.
Now, once you get in your service, let's say the patient gets sick, and what do you do? Just do you treat him, send him to the hospital, or?
It depends on what's going on. We always ask if you have the loved one, say, in your home, and maybe there's something going on, maybe you think they're getting pneumonia, the one thing we ask is we will send a nurse out 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to assess that patient, to see what we think. Our doctors are on call 24 hours, 7 days a week. So that nurse gets in touch with our physician if we think they need antibiotics, if we think they need breathing treatments, if we think they need a chest x-ray, we'll set that up to come in the home so that you can make. And then if we say to you, okay, you know, we've done antibiotics maybe for a little while and it's not helping, or this chest x-ray, maybe we think they have pneumonia, you can make an informed decision. You know, do you want to continue, and depending on the age of your loved one and depending on what's going on, would they want to go back in the hospital? And again, we help you make those decisions. A lot of our patients, especially our facility patients, will say to us, we don't want to, please, no more hospital. They don't want to go back into the hospital. Many of their children will intervene, say if something happens, and they'll say to the facility, no, don't even bother calling 911 because I'm not going to allow them to go. But it is up to you.
It's up to the patient to make that
Patient
decision.
and/or the healthcare
Whatever
surrogate,
representative.
if the patient can. I don't want to, yes, you do need two physicians.
Two independent physicians.
And yes, two independent, so if you have your own primary physician, and then one of our physicians. If you don't have your own primary physician, then two of our physicians can do it as well.
And if you send them, the patient to the hospital, then Medicare will pay for that?
If you send the patient to the hospital, it becomes a little muddy. If I have you under our service for heart failure, and you break your foot, and you need surgery on your foot, yes, Medicare will pay for that because it is not related to your heart failure. If I have you for heart failure and you go into the hospital and something is going on with your heart, you have to make a decision. If the emergency room says, well, we think that you should be hospitalized because we want to do a cardiac cath because we think it's something to do with your heart, Medicare, as long as you're under the hospice benefit, is not going to pay for that because they're going to say you're a hospice patient. So your choice then becomes, do I want to forego the hospital and just be comfortable with hospice, or you can choose to actually revoke the hospice Medicare benefit, and then therefore go in the hospital and Medicare will pay.
But you'd have to revoke.
But you would have to
It
revoke.
makes sense if you're on hospice for a heart condition, then
Right.
you're
Yeah.
accepted.
So by revoke, you mean you have to renegade?
Correct.
Okay.
You have to fire us.
But you can take them back, after a certain amount of time, right?
You can, but you can't play that
No.
game back and forth.
Right. You have to make a decision.
You have to make a decision. Yeah, Medicare does not look kindly on us.
Flip-flopping.
Yes, because then it looks like we don't want to pay for something, and then as soon as you get it done.
Well, you're playing both sides of the field.
Right.
In your years of experience, do you get more the referral from the primary physician of the patient to have hospice take over, or is that the family the one that makes the decision?
Unfortunately or unfortunately, we more get the referrals from the hospital and the family. Rarely do primary physicians refer. And that's through up and down the state of Florida.
And I think you hit the nail on the head earlier, Marge, when you were saying that it's a denial factor.
Very
Because
much so.
a general practitioner that sees their patient on a
But
regular
for a
basis.
physician to lose a patient is like, they didn't do good enough.
Correct. When I was working up in the Gainesville area and I was making a call on an oncology office who would give us some referrals, and I asked them, the oncologist, why don't you refer your patients when you know there's nothing else? And he said to me, Marge, he said, how am I supposed to get up and look at myself in the mirror every morning if I don't think I can save them?
Well, there's a reality. Yeah.
I'm from a family of doctors, and I'm sorry, but they don't operate that way.
Thank you, thank
Crazy.
you. And I know now it is being brought into medical
Ridiculous.
school
Yeah.
where they are given information on, hospice and having a death and dying talk and with families.
I
but-
taught it at medical school.
Yeah, see,
and
but there's a lot of physicians that just, it's unfortunate, it's
I hate
unfortunate.
to think that they
Maybe that will be
didn't.
forever.
Well, and it's not to be denied that there is a financial motivation there.
Well, absolutely, because if they refer you, now there are some ways now that they can do billing. But back years ago, it used to be if they
Then they're
turned
losing.
you over, they couldn't bill under that Medicare benefit and continue to get money from you. So there was a definite financial motivation.
And I wonder if there's a misconception with them now that they think that too.
There very often is, because our physicians will have to meet with them and tell them, this is how you can do it, so you can
Right.
bill.
Yeah, just an education piece. So, good stuff.
And in fact, what are they billing for?
Well, it depends. And I don't know that much on that side of it. I really, to be honest, I don't.
Yeah, if they're still continuing to see them.
Yes.
I mean, that's a common.
Because you have a lot of concierge physicians
Yeah.
and stuff in this town who can still continue to bill.
Absolutely.
Especially for other areas that are not related to
They're
their
being
hospice
addressed.
diagnosis.
Sure. All right, Lenny's been super patient over here.
I'm learning a lot.
Yeah, I will say
I
that
really am.
one of my favorite things about doing these talks is I learn something new every single time. And even if I'm repeating the same topic in different counties with different panelists, they all have different ideas. So it's very enlightening to listen to you guys. So thank you again for being here. When it comes to retirement distribution planning, tell the audience what types of areas you help in.
There's an old saying that people who retire with income are happier than people with assets. Because assets can be lost, they can be stolen, they can be sued, they can be divorced. A lot can happen with assets. Once you set up an account or a strategic account where you're getting an income for the rest of your life and it can never be disrupted, that's a better way for a lot of my clients to go. Back in the old days, you worked 40 years, you got a pension, you got a paycheck for the rest of your life. Nowadays, we don't see that anymore. I have plans, or there are plans available that you can fund your own pension, and that income stream is going to come in for the rest of your life, and anything that isn't used can be passed on to heirs. But yeah, in my experience, is people with income is a lot happier than just having those assets there, because they're constantly worried about losing them one way or the other, unless you put them in a trust.
I do think that the fear for most folks is that they're going to run out of money.
Well, I was just going to say that the two biggest fears when I sit down with people are running out of money and higher healthcare costs as you get older. When I sit down, I also talk about basic needs, which is your housing, your food, car insurance, those kind of things. So we'll set up an income just for that. So then they have that income coming in to pay the basic needs. They never have to worry about that. Then another income coming in for vacations and fun, golfing, movies, going out to dinner, things like that. So you have these two streams of income coming in, and again, they last for the rest of their life, and they're guaranteed. So there's 3 phases to any retirement, and the first stage is your go-go years. That's when you leave your job, you say goodbye, and you're going here, you're going there, you're trying that, you're eating here, you're going there, you're going to the movies. And then the slow-go years is when the health issues start kicking in, and you're not moving as much, and you're staying home a little bit more. And then there's the no-go years, and that's when you're starting to get really ailed with health issues, and then maybe looking to assisted living and those kind of things. So when I sit down with someone, we put together a plan that covers all of that.
Any strategies you want to go over with these folks?
No, they have to call me to get those.
Okay. So call Lenny to get your strategies. Any questions? Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
TV has been flooded with commercials from the Manatee firm, how to protect your stuff. What is that about?
That would be a Jeffrey question. I don't even. I'm not sure.
Do you, I can't speak specifically to what they may or may not be selling, but I can tell you that most of the stuff you see on the internet or on television, and I'm specifically not speaking about them, but I would presume that it would have to do, at the end of the day, with a sale of an annuity product. And why? Because annuity products pay very generous commissions. And so...
But is that to say that they're all bad?
No, annuities are not all bad. There are specific situations for that annuities are extremely helpful with. The problem is many of the people that only sell annuities are that age-old adage. If I own a hammer, everything I see is a nail. You know, so people that only sell those products sometimes may be tempted to tout the benefits of that product over more traditional products that Lenny may use in combination with annuities that would have a more rounded portfolio. Because it's very tempting to say to you, hey, look, I can get you $5,000 a month for the rest of your life, instead of something like, I can get you $4,000 a month for the rest of your life, and you'll have $100,000 in the bank still. You know, so those
It's
sorts
too
of things.
good to be true that it
Yeah.
usually.
I was gonna say that's the ask.
It's not cold, the number is 22222.
Right. And it's this.
Very cryptic.
Those individuals, I can remember years ago, when I first came down to Florida 15 years ago, there was two people that had bought an entire TV station. They were on like Channel 6 or whatever, and 24 hours a day, it showed these two people pretending to have a back and forth about how good it was, and they were selling annuity and life insurance strategies.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll put it this way, do you know how much a person makes off of annuity? Take a guess how much a person, the minimum a guy makes off of a $1 million annuity.
Probably 10%.
Usually about right. Single premium immediate annuities pay about 3%. Well, they pay 3% the first year, but they're putting them in
Yeah,
bonus
I know,
annuities,
never
which are
seen
giving
that.
them 7 or 8%.
Yeah.
So 3% in the first year is what usually people get, $30,000. Okay. Sometimes people though are tempted to put you in what are called bonus annuities or other products, which have higher payouts and look very attractive. Life insurance, if somebody buys $1 million life insurance policy for you, they also do get paid very well. Not that life insurance is a bad thing. Life insurance is a good thing. It's just not a good enough thing to mortgage your house to buy an annuity, to buy a $5 million life insurance policy on it. That's what I am talking about avoiding. Those types of situations. I'm not saying that life insurance isn't good. It is excellent for many things. Okay? But you have to get with a completely well-rounded financial advisor, so that you will not, so that they will be able to resist the temptation to say, I have a hammer and a screwdriver, and if we need anything other than these two, I'm going to tell this lady we need these two things. You know,
Good advice.
Good advice, yeah. Speaking of life insurance, do you want to touch on any of the products that are out there that maybe have like a cash value or?
Typically, life insurance, there's really two kinds. Whole cash value, whole life, and term. And both have their place. If you needed just some quick, something to cover a debt, I would go term. It's very inexpensive, and it gets the job done. Or cash value, whole life, it's like buying your home. You buy it, you pay into it for a certain amount of time, the house is paid for, now you have all this equity in the home, and it lasts for the rest of your life. So it's really, we always say situation is boss, so when I sit down with someone, it's basically what you're buying the life insurance for. If you're buying it to cover a mortgage, I would go, let's just do a term, get it done. If it's something that you need to last forever, like a final expense plan to pay for a funeral or something like that, then you want to go whole life, because that lasts forever.
Speaking of pre-planning, Vern, do you want to cover the guarantees that are out there for pre-planning your funeral? What type of guarantees do you have for?
Well, you guarantee by making the purchase.
Right. So if someone prepays for their expenses, what are the guarantees that the company's not going to go out of business and that you wouldn't have your expenses
the
covered?
fact that we are part of the Dignity Memorial Service, which is very stable.
Sure.
And it's interesting to note how Dignity Memorial evolved because the founder, Robert Waltrip, this was in Houston, Texas, began to observe, he was a funeral director, that so many of his colleagues throughout the United States who had been part of this generational handing on of the family tradition. I'm sure many of you are familiar with that tradition. I know in our town it was very much like this. Weld Funeral Home was a third generation funeral home, and the family lived above the home, and the sons carried on the tradition of the father, et cetera, et cetera. Well, all of a sudden, that cultural shift began to have other ideas, and there was not this succession in place. So Mr. Waltrip began to realize this as a concern, like small towns not having a funeral home anymore. And that's really what motivated his vision to begin securing this resource that has now resulted in a network of over 2,000 funeral homes that are part of the Dignity family, the Dignity Memorial family of funeral home providers. One of the very strong merits in that is a concept called national transferability.
I was just going to ask you that. A lot of folks that are, living in Naples, they may be from northern states. What do you do if someone wants to be buried in Wisconsin, for example?
Right. Well, and in many cases, those individuals might have also purchased funeral plots, cemetery plots in their northern climes. Various scenarios begin to unfold. One is they might sell, excuse me, their funeral plot up north, but if that's not the option that they choose, then through our national transferability program, they would be, having secured their pre-plan with us, that would be part of their disposition upon death.
Would it be smart for them to buy their pre-planning in the state that they want to be buried in? Or could they buy here in Florida and say, I want my body to be...
Well, that becomes part of how they execute the document.
Sure.
I think basically, if the motivation is there to take this initiative, regardless of where it is, that's one of the merits of what is offered through Hodges. It's sort of like strike while the iron is hot. You might have the intent, and by the time you went home for Christmas or whatever, you had other priorities. Really, it's kind of like when that mindset is ripe, take action. Because once you do, you suddenly begin to realize what a relief it is in terms of a burden on, even subconsciously, a burden on your to-do list.
Sure.
I had a very interesting experience meeting with a broker from Raymond James, and I presented my mission, and in the context that financial planners do not prompt this question, that they continue to avoid it, all in keeping with this mindset of denial of death. And he challenged me. He said, oh, wait. We have a litany of various needs that have to be considered and brought into financial planning. And I said, you're kidding. So is pre-need planning included? And he said, oh, I'm sure it is. He said, as a matter of fact, come on. He invited me to look over his shoulder at his desk, and he opened up the website. And together, we scrolled through a plethora of prompts. And guess what? Pre-need planning was not part of it. But there was a blank at the very end.
And you had him write it in.
That had other.
Okay.
And I remember he threw up his hands and he's like, oh, so we're the ones who are supposed to bring it up. You see, that's the whole challenge. How do you bring this up?
Just get more comfortable talking about it, right?
And it's so essential that we begin to feel comfortable with having a dialogue about that. You know, we are not living in Shangri-La. Who remembers the James Hilton novel, was it Lost Horizons? Did anyone read that? You remember that?
I come from an era that doesn't read anymore.
There's the thought. I'm sure it's available on your Kindle.
But you know, all four of us have that obligation to have that uncomfortable talk.
Yes.
Whether it's death and
Wholeheartedly
all that.
agree with
So, and I tell my clients when I sit down with them, I say, I'm going to ask you questions that are going to make everybody squirm a little bit, but unless I get the answers, I can't take care of you properly. So.
That is so commendable.
Well, we'll wrap up with Marge. I wanted to go over some things that you offer that after death for your support groups, your bereavement, for children and for adults, because I know you guys have a really extensive program for people that lose their grandparents or lose their parents.
Yeah, we do have an extensive grief support program. For someone who has a loved one who dies with us, we follow that family for a year. We have regular grief support groups that we have. We actually have our children's house, Aunt Janet's house, just recently has opened here.
It's brand new, right?
Yes, it's brand new, and that can be for a child who had a parent, grandparent, aunt, uncle who died with us, or anybody in the community.
Even pets, you guys have
We
bereavement
do.
for, right?
We have pet bereavement. In fact, our staff.
I will need that, just so you ladies
Yes,
know.
our staff. We have in our reasons for getting a paid day off.
Yeah.
For our staff for pet bereavement.
Oh my
Our
gosh.
staff.
Sure, a pet is, something you endear yourself to.
They're
I don't
part-
have children. My pets are my children.
Yeah, they're parts of our family. But for the community, if a child has lost a parent to incarceration or through divorce, not necessarily through death, but just any type of loss, we work with those kids. We have kids camps for them. We also align ourselves, we have support groups, grief support groups, men's groups, women's groups. We do as much as we can. We also work with specific entities. We work with the veterans groups in particular. We work with the Parkinson's group and those patients and, getting those through. We do, a big portion of what we do is education, both while individuals are living and after they're gone, so that anything that is needed from that grief support, we're here for.
How long do you carry the support after,
For a year.
For a
After
year.
the person passes, yes, we follow for a year.
somebody who has been diagnosed with dementia, do you give support to the,
To the family
family
member?
or to the spouse?
We can connect you with the support groups for specific disease processes.
Okay.
So whether it be dementia or Parkinson's, both which have very active
All those can be
groups.
found in your seniors blue book.
Yes, and they're all in the book here. But we do have the referral sources for those specific groups, yes.
In this book?
Yep.
Yeah.
Under
That's what
support
it's for.
groups. Support groups for specific ailments, to be exact. All right, well, we'll wrap up with that. If you guys have specific questions for the panelists after we're done, please feel free to ask. But thank you so much for coming. I know it's not easy to talk about these things, but it is necessary. So again, I applaud you guys for being here. And let's give them a round of applause.